Well, I'd like to welcome you to the Reed and Christine Halliday Executive Lecture Series again this week. We're fortunate this week actually to have Reed Halliday on campus with us. He couldn't make it today, but it's always nice to have him around. We also are honored to have with us President Matthew Holland with us here today as well. Great when the President can visit with us, and we're always glad to see him. Today's special guest, however, is Isaac Jacobson, and Mr. Jacobson has been an entrepreneur and business owner for over 2 decades. His unique tactics have made him proficient in streamlining business development, assembling top-tier executive teams, raising millions in startup capital, forming key strategic alliances, and recruiting powerful board members. He has held various executive positions around the country that include the Dial.com, Digenex Technologies, Digital Kiosk Technologies, MD Biologics, and Humanizing Technologies. He's currently the CEO of eTags, a Utah-born company that he acquired in 2006 from Wasatch Ventures, which is a Draper Fisher Jurvetson firm. eTags owns the patents on attaching CDs and DVDs to consumer products, with over 1 billion retail products attaching CDs and DVDs as a value added. Isaac just recently became a new owner, co-owner anyway, of the Utah Blaze, a professional arena football team, and is an active venture investor in multiple companies. One of the things that we appreciate greatly about Isaac here is that he's dedicated to his community, serving on our Utah Valley University Foundation Board. He also co-chairs the Snow College Finance Board, so he's very active in his community, which is always nice to see. Isaac currently resides in Mapleton, Utah, with his wife Tara, who's a UVU alum, and their 3 children. Would you please join me in welcoming Mr. Isaac Jacobson?
Thank you. Thank you, Dean Wright, and thank you, President Holland, for coming here. It makes me a little more nervous, but I'll try to do you well. Hey, this is my 2nd time speaking here, so this is a bit of an old hash, same suit kind of thing. And, but I want to get right into it, and I wanted to thank Dean Wright for giving me that introduction. And so let's just jump right into it. I've been asked to speak about my background, and I don't like doing that too much. I like talking just about business deals, but I'm going to go do a little bit of that because background equals context. And what I've done is I've assembled a presentation. If I could sit myself down when I was 21 in college, myself now at 40, and give myself advice on making my first million at 25 versus 35, this is what I would tell myself. So hopefully you can get some of that. But background is important. And underdog advantages, my truths. I mean, this is something that I've learned over time of being an underdog. And guess what? We're all underdogs. We are. I think the moment you cease to see yourself as an underdog is the moment you stop fighting for stuff. If you think you've arrived, you give up. And I've done that, and I've paid dearly for it. And then actions, what you can use right now, because none of this matters if you can't use it for yourself. And then what I'm also going to give you is a intro to the CEO's secret wish list and the 5-second resume. Hopefully that'll help you in your endeavors. So let's get to my background. You didn't think I was going to go back that far, huh? There I am, dressed as one of the 3 amigos. I'm the 4th amigo there. Like most of my suits, it doesn't fit me right. My belly sticks out, but it's okay. I went way back. So you can see here, this is the reason I put this is this shows my Latino background. And being born Latino, I was a born underdog. In '71, there wasn't a lot of Latinos in Utah, frankly. I was the only one in my graduating class at North San Pete High. But I was raised on a farm in Fountain Green. And this picture's here because this is the only toy I had at that age. And I'm not here to give you a sob story, but we wore the wheels off that little red wagon. And it's actually going to be used in my presentation, but me and my brothers just playing like crazy on that thing. And you know, what was interesting about being raised on a farm is a lot of people say, well, a farm teaches you hard work. No, a farm taught me consequence. And the consequence, anytime we have an action and we have a consequence, the consequences are the paths that we walk on. It's that simple. And what I learned on a farm is that as a child, when you're assigned an animal and you don't take care of that animal, it dies. That's an amazing consequence to learn as a 5-year-old. And so I learned that if I didn't act on something and took care of the project that I was assigned, it literally died. And that really stuck with me. And I actually had to go through that. And not only did it die, was it a sad thing, but that we had less money. We did without. My father raised us in an abandoned schoolhouse. We didn't have running water till I was 7. We actually had an outhouse. And he took over this old schoolhouse. And if you can look there, you can just see kind of the windows are taped up and stuff like that because we couldn't afford that stuff. But the other reason I put this picture of the wagon is it became my instrument. So as a little kid, I was one day looking at that wagon thinking there's something other than playing with it that I can do with this thing. So I instinctively went through the house, took every valuable possession we have, threw it in the wagon, went door to door and sold it. All within about a 2-hour period. The reason I sold it so quickly is my parents were gone and I had to sell it before they got back. And so when my parents got back from shopping that day, my mom was answering phone calls saying, hey, you want to come get your stuff? And by the way, bring $5 because I'm not going to give it back to you. You got to buy it back. And so I learned that I needed an instrument. Just having ambition alone doesn't matter. You can have it. Everyone has it. But you need an instrument. You need something to help you, whether it's a professor, whether it's a coach, whether it's a colleague. You need an instrument to help you carry out your task. And so, like I said, I was a graduate in North St. Pete and Snow College. Go Hawks. Anyone? Dang. Anyone from Snow College? Please. Yay! Snow. I love snow. It's the only school that would accept me. And so it's the one I went to. But I loved it there. So I'm going to jump ahead of myself. And if you walk away with anything out of this, it is this. Know your value. When I was at North St. Pete and Snow College, I had two very close professors who taught me what my individual piece of value was. And it wasn't like, oh, Isaac, you're a good person, you're special, because everyone's special, which means everyone isn't. So they really pulled out what was valuable in me, and by showing that to me, I could build upon that. And so if you walk away with anything, this is the one key thing. So I'm going to get into a little bit more history. So this is my underdog advantage. So that was my number 1 underdog advantage, knowing your value. This is my number 2. A little context. This is my grandfather, Newell Baum. He was a judge. He ran for Congress and governor, lost both elections by like a 1% margin. So very political, and he was a big entrepreneur. And lastly, he was a polygamist. In this state, that doesn't mean much, but when I say that at UMass or Harvard, they kind of want to take me off the stage, but that's what he did. And one day, when I was, he has a lot of grandkids, if you can imagine. He had 3 wives, and when we would have family reunions, there's a lot of people. And so to rise above that roar, I was bragging about one day how I could sell Ginzu knives and make all this money, and I couldn't wait to get on the street to sell because of one thing I've learned, I was a pretty good salesperson. And he said, Isaac, and the first time he ever got out of his easy chair and directly addressed me, and he said, Isaac, I want you to listen to something. This is a rule, and it's become one of mine now. He said, figure out what you're going to make. Cut it in half, then cut it in half again. That's what you take home. Figure out how long it'll take, double it, then double it again, and that's how long it takes. I hated him when he told me this. I felt like he was squishing every little ambition and dream I had. Now, this applies to ventures. This applies to new businesses. And I've spent my entire career trying to defeat this, and I can't. I haven't been able to. All the news we hear about the meteoric rise of Facebook and Google and Twitter and all these other big companies, those are the exceptions. They're not the rule. We all want to be the exception, but most of us live in the rule. And if I've applied this, I do well. One of the things I do now because of this rule is I only look at billion-dollar companies. So I only invest in those companies. So if you cut that in half and cut it in half again, it's still a $250 million company. That's a good company. And when I walk in a room, a lot of people go, oh, here's the downer. Well, when we look at our checkbooks and we look in our pockets at the end of the day, that rule is always applied. So that's my number 2 advantage. So I'm going to talk a little bit now, briefly about the different companies I've been involved in that Dean Wright talked about. And the Dial.com was my first company, my first tech company. And I sold that to Laudai Technologies. It was a public company, then that was acquired by Nokia. These companies focused in digital distribution systems. So in other words, what I found out is that I was good at figuring out how to sell digital information from the licensee, like the music labels, to the device. All those systems in between is what I was in charge of. I sold it and wrapped businesses around that. And when I did the dial and sold it, the venture capitalist said, hey, Isaac, form another company, let's do it again. And I said, you know what? After that, the dot-com bubble had burst. I said, let me fix the dead bodies you're performing triage on. And I knew they were making the money. So I jumped the fence and went there. When I joined the VCs, what was interesting is that I thought I was being a turnaround man, and I was actually a hatchet man. So when the entrepreneurs and the seed capital and the seed investors would see me walk in the door, they would gasp, because I generally would come in to cut up the company, remove headcount and stuff like that. And I turned into, on top of that, a headhunter. Had I known that I was going to be a headhunter, half my day was spending headhunting, I probably wouldn't have done the gig. It's tough when you have a diminishing company or a company struggling, and you do all these cuts, and then now you got to hire a CTO, or now you got to hire a new CEO, and you got to convince that guy from San Francisco or Seattle or New York to move to Terre Haute, Indiana. It's a tough gig. So I learned how to get to the right people at the right time. And so, so from that, I learned how to hire people, and I learned what was key to me. So I'm going to digress just a little bit before. Well, let me do this first. So this is my third rule. It's never too early to sell, and never stop selling. So in every one of these companies, I was selling vapor. I was selling the promise of what the software could do, but couldn't do yet. That's a tough sale. And a lot of these companies would say, well, Isaac, let's wait till it's done, let's wait till it's done. And if any of you are engineers or coders, the product's never done. It never is done. So it would be delayed. And by the time I was allowed to sell it, I then had a 3-month, a 6-month window to sell it again. I had to ramp up from zero. So the moment I would get into a company, I just sell, 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 sell. And if the client wasn't exactly buying what we had, I'd turn to the coding group and I'd say, guess what? I got a client, but 20% of it has to change to this to convert it into 5 million or whatever we sold it for. So they would adjust it. And so that is very common in technology. And then never stop selling. The times that I stopped selling, or I felt comfortable, or I hit my commission rate or my quota rate, the jungle would grow in front of me. It was amazing. It was just this weird entropy moment where everything just kind of, the network just kind of crumbled. Even though I felt like I was tending to it, I wasn't selling. I was just tending to it. And so never stop selling. I actually got that from my first business partner at the Dial, Todd Herman, who's now wildly successful in his own ventures. But one thing I want to divert to just real quickly, and I thought of this to make this one different than the last I've done before. My very first business. My very first business was actually a vending machine. I borrowed $2,000 from my mom, and which I hated to do. But I did, and I came up with the idea called the medicine cabinet. And basically, it was in a hotel, and it sounded just like it says. It sold toothpaste, toothbrushes, aspirin, stuff like that. And I did okay. I split 1/3 of the profits with the hotel, and I was in 19 total. And this was when I was 19. So it was doing all right. I was just taking good cash out. I was sitting down one day with my mom, who was now technically my investor and CEO. And so she was saying, well, this really doesn't look too good. Why do you think it is? And I was afraid to sell 2 items because it embarrassed me. Can you guess what those are? Condoms and feminine products. She hit me side the head and said, if it's a real medicine cabinet, it's got to have everything, other than prescription drugs, which would probably sell really well. A little OC on the side. So I went ahead and I put them in there, and I just was embarrassed to buy the stuff. And so I put them in, and every one of those racks sold out. So I started charging $1, then $2, then $3, then $4, then $5 for a 10-cent, 20-cent item. You know what that taught me? Supply and demand, baby. Because when you need, you're going to pay $5 no matter what, right? You're going to pay whatever they ask in those situations. The moment I did that, however, the hotels saw what I did and said, we're going to keep it. Thank you very much for the idea. So that taught me supply and demand and contracts. So lesson learned. Now that stuff's everywhere. So anyway, that's a little digression. So